Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. It's been a little while, right, since we've done a live stream. It is great to be back with you. I was doing some travel these past few weeks. I was in Israel. I was in DC. I was in Dallas. So it was tough schedule-wise to do a live stream, but we wanted to get one in because we really enjoy these live streams. I love it personally. Just being able to go for about an hour. We'll go till around, sorry about that. We'll go till around 5 p.m. Eastern time, and we will take your questions. And I love that. I love the interaction that we have during these live streams. So I got to tell you, I really missed them over the past few weeks, but we wanted to get one in this week, right before the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. As you know, we usually do the live streams Wednesday, Thursday, but I said, hey, things are going to be a little hectic tomorrow, some last-second stuff before the holiday. So here we are, Tuesday, November 22nd. Folks, we've got a lot to talk about. Let's see who we have right now chatting with us. We have people from around the world. We'll have thousands by the time we are done today. That's why it's just always fun to see people from around the world. You know, when you record the newscast every day, and we come to you every single day except Sunday, unless news breaks, you oftentimes you don't know who's watching, where around the world someone's watching. That's why I love the live streams. During our live chats, I see people from every continent, quite literally, joining us and saying, hey, I love the show. I love watching. So that is really cool and exciting for me. Africa, Europe, Asia, South America, North America. I like to say we even have some penguins in Antarctica on their phones watching the Watchman Newscast. So it's fun to see everyone and see where everyone is coming from for such a time as this, right? God has given us this technology. This technology can be misused, unfortunately, as we know in this day and age, social media and all the things we have. But man, as believers, as followers of Jesus, we can use this for good, to spread the truth, to spread the gospel, which is the ultimate truth, the way and the life. So we'll take it, and we'll take advantage of it and use it, again, for these Bible times that we are living in. Okay, what are we discussing today? And hello to everyone. I see people New York City, New Jersey, the Netherlands, Oregon, Honduras, Puerto Rico. This is great. The big story today we need to talk about, folks, Benjamin Netanyahu threats against Bibi by the Iranian regime, in particular, a commander from Iran's elite Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, IRGC for short. And he he quite literally threatened to kidnap the former and soon to be incoming Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, kidnap him and, quote, frog march him to Iran and then enslave him in Iran. We're going to read you the direct quote verbatim, word for word in a minute. I want to share it with you directly. Now, sometimes people say, well, it's all just bluster. In this case, folks, it really is just bluster. I have to say they're in no position to kidnap Benjamin Netanyahu, but it's dangerous bluster, no doubt. It shows you where the Iranian regime is coming from. It shows you their intent, and it shows you, I believe, the special animus that the Iranian regime has reserved for Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu. I'll tell you why in a minute when we dig into it. By the way, I am reading Netanyahu's autobiography right now. It's called Bibi, My Story. And folks, it is great so far. I mean, he's an excellent writer, great storyteller. Not only is it a history lesson, but he digs into the relations with Obama, with Trump, with Biden. It's fascinating. With the Arab leaders, it is just fascinating. The shadow war against Iran. So it's a great read. And personally, I take a little bit of pride in it, in that Benjamin Netanyahu went to Cheltenham High School outside of Philadelphia, about 20 minutes from where I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia. Bibi and his brother Yoni, who was an Israeli hero, they went to Cheltenham High School. So some interesting trivia for you there. If you didn't know that, his dad was teaching at a university in Philly at the time. This was in the 1960s. A very accomplished family, the Netanyahu's family. His father was brilliant, a professor, a scholar. As I mentioned, his brother Yoni was a hero, died in the Entebbe raid in 1976, a legend in Israel. And his younger brother, Ido, also very accomplished in his own right, a brilliant family, a very special family. But I have to admit, as a Philly guy, I took some pride in that. I said, wow, kind of a local boy, but not really. But we'll claim him. I think he went to Cheltenham High School for 2 or 3 years. 3 years, I believe, did Benjamin Netanyahu. So pretty cool little trivia for you there. And he also went to MIT here in the United States, up in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And another Cheltenham High School alum, Reggie Jackson, the Hall of Fame baseball player. Okay, I'm done bragging. But in all seriousness, let's move on. So we got to talk about this threat against Bibi. Number 2, we got to talk about Iran's nuclear program. You might say, oh, this again? Well, now they're enriching uranium at close to weapons grade level. We'll touch on it briefly. It's worth mentioning, okay? And then we'll move on, I promise. We got to talk about this Hezbollah chemical weapons threat. Yes, you heard me right. Hezbollah and chemical weapons in the same sentence. I didn't stutter. We got to talk about that. And I want to talk also about the incoming Israeli government, what we can expect. As you can tell, we're going to pack a lot into this hour, by the way, including your questions. And I want to talk about the prophetic implications for all of this. When I heard Hezbollah, chemical weapons, and Hezbollah, and we talked about this on yesterday's newscast. If you missed it, folks, you can check it out in our archives right under newscast. While you're there, I assume if you're in the live stream, you're kind of our special forces here. But if you haven't subscribed, hey, just click the subscribe button. It's completely free. And join us here, the watchmen and women on the wall, for such a time as this. We would love to have you as a subscriber and be with us every day. You get the alerts when you click the notification bell. Again, we're coming to you every day, Monday through Saturday now. We might not be with you this Saturday because of the holiday weekend, but generally every week, Monday through Saturday. And if something breaks on Sunday, we will come to you. We want to be your one-stop shop for all things Middle East for such a time as this. And we try to break down the world's most complex and strategic region in an easy to understand way and inform you as to how it affects you, no matter where you live. What happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. And that brings us to prophecy. I mentioned Hezbollah, chemical weapons, Hezbollah trying to transit chemical weapons through Syria, reportedly trying to do this through Syria into Lebanon. I think of Isaiah 17, the destruction of Damascus, which is foretold by the prophet Isaiah. A lot going on there. We'll dig into that as well. And how about that? Speaking of prophecy, how about that Russia-Iran relationship just solidifying seemingly every day, folks, in a troubling way? I'm going to break that down as well. But let's see. We've got a good amount of people with us now. We will have thousands before we are done. Questions at the end. Send them along. We are gathering them, and we'll be ready to answer them. Let's get into this Bibi threat to kidnap the soon-to-be, once again, Prime Minister of Israel. Let's check it out right now, folks. I'm looking down because I want to quote directly just from my phone. I have the article here from the Jerusalem Post. IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guards Commander Mojtaba Fada, said Iran would, quote, frog march Netanyahu to Iran wearing a leash and a slave collar. Very interesting. He is the Iranian regime's commander of the IRGC in the province of Isfahan. That's significant. There's a nuclear reactor there. And he said, and I quote, he was speaking on Sunday, apparently. He said, and I quote, the former, soon to be current, prime minister of the Zionist regime, Benjamin Netanyahu, hoped that the protest in Iran would lead him to travel to Tehran. I assume he means after the regime is overthrown in these protests. But Allah willing, the Islamic Republic will prevail over the protesters and will frog march that prime minister to Iran wearing a leash and a slave collar. Good luck. It ain't happening. Fada also urged the destruction of the Jewish state, calling it, quote, the child murdering regime of Israel. Now, number one, this is a case, many times Iran makes threats. Most of the time, Iran makes threats. They're actually capable of carrying them out. They have the capability, logistically, everything else, militarily. They're not capable of this. And I'm not being overconfident on behalf of Israel, but it ain't happening. The security around the prime minister, intense to say the least. The security inside Israel, trying to penetrate Israel's borders. A lot of levels we could go on about that. But it does show you a few things. Number one, this is a top commander in Iran's top echelon, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, openly calling for the kidnapping and enslavement of the leader of a sovereign state. This is the equivalent of, say, a top commander in the U.S. military doing the same. Now, could you imagine? I live in the United States or wherever your country you're coming from. If you're in Europe, wherever, South America, could you imagine? It depends on the country, of course. If you're China, North Korea, this is par for the course, Iran. But can you imagine being in a place in the so-called free world where a leader says, or a leader in the military of that respective nation says, you know what, we want to kidnap him, we're going to enslave him and bring him here in a dog collar? What would happen? I can assure you that wouldn't happen in the United States. The Pentagon would condemn this commander. He'd lose his rank. He'd be everything else. Even if he was saying it about an enemy nation, even if he was saying about Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, or Xi Jinping, or someone like that. But Iran doesn't play by those rules, folks. And you would think maybe, now, could you imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and say, again, a top commander in the United States, or God forbid, a top commander in the Israeli military made such a threat, made such a pronouncement against the leader of Iran, or even the leader of China, or North Korea, or Vladimir Putin? What would the UN do? My word. The UN would sanction and roundly condemn, release a statement condemning the United States, condemning Israel. But what do you get when Iran spews forth, the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people, who are bravely in the streets right now against the regime? What do you get when regime members spew out this hatred, this bile? What do you get from the UN? Crickets chirping, nothing, radio silence. Can you say double standard? Can you say hypocrisy? Can you say moral relativism? And can you say a complete lack of moral clarity? That's what you have at Turtle Bay in New York in the form of the United Nations. He makes this statement, calls for literally the kidnapping and enslavement of the leader of a sovereign nation. And the UN, which is supposed to represent all nations and stand up for the rights of all nations, says nothing. Doesn't even condemn the Iranian regime, doesn't even condemn this commander by name. I'm not surprised. Don't get me wrong. Everyone watching is saying, dude, what do you expect? It's the UN. Folks, I get it. I know. But still, we should point the hypocrisy out, right? Shouldn't we still? It still deserves to be pointed out. And I'll continue to point it out because the UN has utterly failed and then some in its mission, miserably. And the UN has passed more resolutions against Israel than any other nation. Folks, really wrap your heads around that. More resolutions against Israel, a nation the size of the state of New Jersey, a democracy, than any other nation. Hard to wrap your head around that. That means Iran, China, North Korea, the former Soviet Union, Cuba, the list goes on. They've had more resolutions aimed their way than Israel has by the UN. I rest my case. There's really nothing else to say. Let's move on. I'm dead serious. Speaking of Benjamin Netanyahu, we've got this threat, but this is a steady stream of threats, again, from Iran. It's usually not so personal. It's usually Israel writ large, the nation state of Israel, or the Jewish people. It's usually not so personally aimed at one leader. They did that with Trump a lot too. The Iranian regime hated Trump, which brings me to the crux of the matter. Why? Why such a personal targeting and why such personal animus against Bibi and against Trump? Simple. Because they hurt the Iranian regime in a way that other leaders haven't. Trump ordered the hit on Qasem Soleimani, the terror master, the not so dearly departed terror kingpin of the Iranian regime, the third, possibly even the second, most powerful man in the Iranian regime, was killed in a U.S. drone strike ordered by former President Trump in January 2020. And the regime has never forgotten it. They've been vowing revenge ever since. And that was decided upon in the Oval Office by former President Trump. And the regime hates him for it. Not only that, he pulled out of the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, which hurt the regime big time. And he ramped up sanctions on Iran and squeezed them once again on the Iranian regime. He also designated the aforementioned Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps as a specially designated terrorist organization. By the way, he also moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, recognized Jerusalem as Israel's undivided capital, and recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. So Iran had a lot to be mad about when it came to former President Trump. When it came to or comes to Benjamin Netanyahu, same deal. Bibi, prime minister from, well, the first go-round was 1996 to 1999. Then we had a 10-year lull where he served as finance minister, different positions in the opposition in the Knesset. Then once again, he became prime minister in February 2009 and served through June 2021, a solid 12 years at the helm for Benjamin Netanyahu. That second go-round, 15 overall. And during that second go-round, folks, from 2009 until 2021, Netanyahu really went on the offensive against Iran and against Iran's nuclear weapons program. Covert actions, sabotage against Iran's nuclear facilities time and time again, fought wars against Hamas, obviously, multiple wars against that Iranian proxy, also Islamic Jihad as well. And the big coup, well, a few, I'd say the two that really stand out. And you know that Israel provided some of the intel in the hit on Soleimani, by the way. But I'd say the two big ones actually came towards the tail end of Bibi's second term as prime minister. Number one, who could forget in 2018 when Netanyahu revealed that treasure trove of Iranian nuclear documents that Israel's Mossad, its spy service, was able to incredibly obtain during a raid, a covert mission in Tehran, in the capital of Iran, under the noses of the Iranian regime. Israel was able to, or the Mossad in particular, was able to take these documents, sensitive, top secret Iranian nuclear documents, smoking guns as to what Iran is up to with their nuclear weapons program. It's all about weaponization, folks. And they were able to smuggle these documents back to Israel. In one piece, the documents, and in one piece, the Mossad agents. And Bibi revealed this to the world. What an embarrassment for the Iranian regime. Talk about egg on their faces. The hated Zionists crept in the cover of night in Tehran, no less, and got their hands on a treasure trove of nuclear documents. And then Netanyahu, who ordered the mission, revealed it to the world. What an utter embarrassment for the Iranian regime. As was Soleimani's death, as was the events of almost 2 years ago now, to the day almost, November 2020, when Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who was considered the father of Iran's nuclear program, he was killed by Israel's Mossad. That's not even really speculation at this point. In a daring hit outside of Tehran, Fakhrizadeh was killed. Soleimani, I said earlier, indispensable to the Iranian regime and their mission and their goals and their strategy around the region and really around the world. But Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, in many ways, folks, was indispensable to that nuclear program. He was eliminated by Israel. Who ordered it? Benjamin Netanyahu. So from 2009 to 2021, Netanyahu was a thorn in Iran's side in many ways. And he will be once again, no doubt. So a special animus, now you see why, that the Iranian regime holds for former President Trump and former and soon to be current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That's why the threats that Iran levies against Bibi and Trump are so personal in nature. They hate the United States writ large and they hate Israel writ large, but there's a special hatred, a demonic hatred. Folks, let's just lay it out. Let's be honest. The spirit of Haman, whose story unfolded in latter-day Persia, some 2,600 years ago, which is laid out in the book of Esther in the Bible. Haman was not Persian by blood, by the way, but he nevertheless was the prime minister in Persia, a very, very powerful man who had an obsessive and demonic hatred for the Jewish people. Things didn't end too well for Haman. He was hung on the very gallows, he and his family, that he had erected for Mordecai. God sometimes, not only does God have an incredible sense of justice, almost a sense of humor. Haman is hung on the very gallows, again, that he erected for Mordecai. You can't make this up. Only the Bible and only these kinds of stories. It's amazing. And I love the story of Esther. And I love that justice, that divine justice that God always seems to come through and administer. And he will do it in the case of the modern day Hamans in Tehran. I'm talking about the Iranian regime as well. So interesting times, folks. And speaking of Benjamin Netanyahu, oh, we've got a troll, GLK. We can block him. Khazar devils. The Jewish people people of Israel are devils. They're Khazars. That's the old counter now from the anti-Semites. Bye-bye. We can delete you. Hey, and the new thing, by the way, folks, as we have in all seriousness, anti-Semitism and that kind of nonsense rising in the United States, remember the new thing now, and I love calling trolls out because we've got great people here on these live streams. So you guys feel free to call them out too. We've got great people here on this live stream from around the world taking time out of their busy day to join us for such a time as this, in these Bible times we're living in, to get a dose of truth and biblical encouragement, brothers and sisters in Christ. And we've got knuckleheads infiltrating and trying to join the chat and anti-Semites. And come on, goodbye. No tolerance for that. And there's a line, if you ever seen a movie called Cool Hand Luke, great flick if you haven't seen it, Paul Newman, some men you just can't reach. And sadly, that's a situation today where the more you try to explain things to people and show what you clearly think is true, like this is obvious, it's common sense, you're getting in return, it's a wall, folks. It's a spiritual battle. It's so clear that we're struggling not against flesh and blood, but as the Apostle Paul said, spirits and principalities. This is a spiritual struggle. And it's raging even online here, of course, during a live stream. But hey, God bless everyone who is joining and joining for the right reasons. And we got to move on. But I wanted to hit on that Iranian obsession with Trump and Netanyahu. Expect this rhetoric, the personal rhetoric with Bibi, to increase, which brings us to Bibi and what is the state of the current government. Okay, we've got negotiations right now. Folks, it's not like, and there's a lot of Americans here, but not all Americans. We have people from all over the world. I don't know how your respective system works. Maybe you have a parliamentary system in your nation. I can tell you here in the United States how it works. The Republican candidate faces off against the Democrat candidate, and there's a winner. Now, sadly, it used to be like the day of the election. That night, you would go to bed knowing so-and-so won the election. He's going to be president. At the very least, you would know maybe in the middle of the night, 3 a.m, 4 a.m, you'd stay up and you watch the results. Not anymore. Now it's not election day. It's like election month or election season. And that ain't good on a lot of levels. And we talked about that, I think, in a recent newscast. But nevertheless, that's the way it works. In Israel, it's different. It's not so much individual against individual. It's party against party. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu heads the Likud party, the most popular party in Israel. His main rival during the recent election was Yair Lapid of the Yesh Atid party. Now, he's the prime minister right now. He just lost, though, the election at Bibi, so he's going to be out soon. So you form a government, or you win the election, I should say. But then you have to go about the business of forming a government, which means you need 61 seats in Israel's Knesset. That's their parliament. That's their version of the U.S. Congress, Israel's Knesset. You need 61 seats. Netanyahu's Likud party, I believe, won 33 or 34 seats. I think 34. I may be wrong. Somewhere around there. I think it was 34. That's obviously not 61. So how does Bibi get to 61? How does he form a government and become prime minister? Well, Likud has to form a coalition with other parties. Now, many times, and you've probably heard a lot about this current coalition that's forming, many times Netanyahu in the past, and this isn't his first rodeo, as they say. It's been a few times, as I mentioned earlier. He had to form coalitions with politicians and political parties who he did not agree with ideologically. That can be difficult. And folks, it's no wonder that those coalitions often don't last very long, and then they end up breaking apart because someone, say you're with a more liberal party and you disagree on a certain issue. Perhaps the more liberal party says, you know what, we're out of here. We're leaving the coalition. You had 62 seats. Now they went and took their 8 seats away. Now you only have 54. You need 61. Does that make sense? Let me know if you have questions about the Israeli political process, because I know it can be complex, but bear with me. This is why we saw Naftali Bennett's government ultimately collapse. Remember, from June 2021 till June 2022, Naftali Bennett was the prime minister, leading a coalition of 8 different political parties. Can you imagine? 8 different parties ranging from far left to an Arab party to a right-wing party. It was a hodgepodge. They were all basically united in their disdain for Benjamin Netanyahu. I called it the anyone but Bibi coalition. Well, since they were so far-flung ideologically, surprise, surprise, it only lasted for a year, and that government dissolved. Yair Lapid then became the interim prime minister. The government was dissolved, and they said, okay, new election in November. In the meantime, Lapid served as the interim, the placeholder. And then Bibi prevailed over Lapid in the real deal in the election in November. As I said, 34 or 35 seats. You got to get to 61. So what does he do? He looks out across the landscape and he says, this time, I want to align with people who share maybe not all of his beliefs, but look, I want to align with right-wing parties. I don't want any liberals or centrists. I want people on the right. Because if we are ideologically aligned for the most part, that gives the coalition a better chance of lasting for not just a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years, maybe 4 years. This thing could have some legs. So what did he do? He went out and he recruited coalition partners. Religious Zionism and Shas are part of the coalition, and United Torah Judaism is the third. So he went out and recruited 3 parties on the right wing of the Israeli political spectrum. And right now they are negotiating. They are negotiating to form the government. It looks like they're going to have it. I believe they're at 64 seats. They're over the 61. If they pool all their resources together, then they will have over 61 seats. The thing is now they're negotiating, and now it gets tricky because the various coalition partners, hey, they want a seat at the table. I want to be defense minister. I want to be finance minister. I want to be foreign minister. Everyone has their eye on a certain position. So that's what the wrangling is about right now. And we had Israel's election was on November 1st. It's now November 22nd. I know Bibi wanted to have this government formed by mid-November. It's now November 22nd. We are getting into late November, and they're still negotiating. This happens a lot. When you're trying to form that coalition, there is a lot of wrangling, and it happens a lot. So we'll see. It seemed to be that there was some progress made earlier this week, and now it seems that the coalition conversation is kind of getting tense again. So I highly doubt, folks, that Netanyahu and his coalition partners, they're on the cusp of having a truly right-wing government. I highly, highly doubt that they're going to let this chance pass them by. It's not impossible that they say, you know what, we're going to blow it up. We're not going to do it after all. But I think they will do everything in their power to make this work, which means Benjamin Netanyahu will be prime minister once again sooner rather than later. And one of the issues he will have to deal with is Hezbollah. And we had this report out of Saudi media, folks, on Sunday. A Saudi media outlet, one of the major ones in Saudi Arabia, reporting that Hezbollah has gotten its hands on chemical weapons, basically chemical missiles with chemical capability that North Korea and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps of Iran, surprise, surprise, worked on. And that Hezbollah has hundreds of these missiles, again, with a chemical weapons capability. And that right now they are in a town in Syria along the Syria-Lebanon border. Remember, Lebanon is Hezbollah's home base, and that Hezbollah wants to transit these missiles into Lebanon. And three guesses on how those missiles would be used. Of course, they'd be pointed at Israel. They'd be for use against the Jewish state. Now, if this report is indeed accurate, and again, we don't have secondary or third sourcing on this, which I usually would love to have on such a report, but nonetheless, it's important to mention, look, the Saudis, I think of Al Arabiya and their certain Saudi media outlets many times are pretty on point with some in-depth reporting about what's going on in the region and some very good sources, especially when it comes to Iran and its proxies. So this report has to be taken seriously, I believe. Now, what was fascinating to me was that the mainstream media virtually ignored it. Israeli media picked it up, but the MSM, surprise, surprise, virtually ignored this report. But I think it's got some implications. Number one, Israel has carried out many strikes, obviously, hundreds and hundreds in Syria over the past 10 years. Many of them were ordered by Benjamin Netanyahu. And some of those strikes involve striking chemical weapons facilities in Syria. We've heard several reports of that, including recently in Masayaf, which is in northwestern Syria, where apparently these Hezbollah chemical tipped missiles were produced. So number one, there's a precedent here. That's why we need to take it seriously. Number two, we know that Iran and Hezbollah have been attempting to get their hands on advanced and more lethal weapons to use against Israel. Usually here in the newscast, we're talking about the precision-guided missiles, PGMs for short. They do exactly what their name says, folks. They are designed to hit the target with greater accuracy and greater precision. So we're talking about PGMs. But folks, this is a new, escalation. Chemical weapons, if this is indeed true. Now, Israel has excellent intelligence, obviously. The Saudis have good intel, and they do some great reporting there in their various media outlets. But Israel's got a leg up there, and it's in their backyard. So rest assured, if a Saudi media outlet is reporting this, then Israel, the Israel Defense Forces, Israeli intelligence, they're well aware of this. So if this is indeed an accurate report, you will be hearing, I would predict, in my humble opinion, that Israel will strike these chemical assets that Hezbollah reportedly has gotten its hands on along the Syria-Lebanon border. They, according to the Saudi piece, they want to transport them to Bint Jbeil, which is a town in southern Lebanon, a Hezbollah stronghold. So, wow, to me, a major report. I'm shocked in one sense that even more Middle East media outlets haven't picked this up. But the prophetic implications, if, God forbid, you don't even want to consider such a thing, obviously, but if chemical weapons were used against Israel, how do you think Israel would respond? Israel's response, and rightfully so, would be devastating, clearly. And that response would target, I would think, Hezbollah, of course, Iran, you would think, and also Syria, which has been housing these chemical weapons, where the chemical weapons are apparently being produced. So you would think that Syria would pay a heavy price for allowing this to occur on its soil. and facilitating it. There's no other way to put it, folks. And Israel threatened Syria a few weeks ago, threatened the Assad regime. If you continue to allow Iran to operate on your soil and transfer weapons and facilitate weapons transfers, then we have DH here too. Daniel, we can block him, making jokes about the Holocaust, the Shoah. So yeah, we can block that as well. Thank God my trusty producer Daniel is here to weed out the anti-Semites and the jokers, which aren't so funny, on the chat. Apologies to everyone who is viewing and is on the chat, having a great conversation back and forth. I'm following you guys. So not a lot of room for Holocaust deniers and people making jokes about the Holocaust. Bye-bye. Good riddance. But where am I getting here with the chemical weapons? And Syria, if it did host such activity on its soil and allow that to be facilitated, where is Damascus, folks? It's the capital of Syria. Do you know what Isaiah 17 says? If you know the word of God, if you don't, pull it up on your phone, your tablet, grab your Bible. I'm still a hard copy guy. I like with books, with my Bible, I like a hard copy in my hands. I'm old school, I guess. I never really got into the Kindle, which the Kindle's great, but I like it in my hands. What can I say? Especially when it comes to the Bible, although I have my verses on my phone and everything. But Isaiah 17 talks about a day that is coming where Damascus, you won't want to be there. Let's just say that. It talks about a day where Damascus will become, quote, a ruinous heap. It will cease to be a city. Now, looking back over the historical landscape, Damascus is one of the world's oldest inhabited cities. It has never been completely destroyed. It has never been completely razed to the ground. Even the Mongols, who were notorious, I read about what the Mongols did to Baghdad. The Mongols were just notorious for leaving a trail of destruction, terror, and mayhem in the Middle East, Asia, Europe, and beyond. Even they did not completely destroy Damascus. And yet, the Bible, the book of Isaiah, chapter 17, is very clear that Damascus will cease to be a city. So one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world will actually cease to be a city. Some people have said, well, look at what happened in the Syrian civil war over the past 11 years. Damascus has been bombed. It's a mess. Yes, but it has not ceased to be a city, folks. People still live in Damascus. It's still up and running. Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator, spends a lot of time there. Iran is obviously very active there. We report practically every other day, it seems, of these Iranian weapons transfers going through Damascus airport. So Damascus is still Damascus. I know there's a lot of rubble there. I know it looks awful, but it hasn't ceased to be a city. It's not a completely ruinous heap. There are still intact buildings in Damascus, and many people still live there. Not what it was, obviously, before 2011, far from it, including the population, but you can't say Isaiah 17, folks, suggest, it states that Damascus will cease to be a city. It will become a ruinous heap. Now, with everything that's been happening in Syria over the past 11 years, and we talk about this consistently on the newscast, and I hear when we talk the prophetic, what do I hear the most? Ezekiel 38 and 39, which I believe is at the doorstep. At the doorstep could be 5 years from now. That's still awful close. The book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog. And the second thing I hear the most is Isaiah 17. Our Watchman viewers are no dummies. We have, I believe, one of the most well-informed audiences and subscriber bases anywhere, certainly on YouTube. And that's why I love the live streams. I love getting the chance to talk to you all and go back and forth on this. But it's going to happen, and people aren't, again, there's no dummies here. People know what's going on in Syria, and that it is kind of a tripwire for potentially major events. I've called it the Great Northern War. Folks, Israel striking Iran's nuclear facilities. We're getting closer to that with Bibi coming back in office. We just had Zaki Hanegbi, an advisor to Bibi, a longtime colleague of Bibi in the Likud party. He's been saying openly in recent weeks, if there's no new Iran nuclear deal, or if there's a horrible deal, and if the U.S. refuses to act, I believe, said Zaki Hanegbi, that Benjamin Netanyahu will act against Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. So that's one major signpost, a potential strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, which could precipitate the Damascus destruction, Isaiah 17, Ezekiel 38-39, all of these events, folks. I've called the Great Northern War. Some have said, is that Psalm 83? My friend Bill Salas, who we've had on the show before, has talked a lot about Psalm 83. He and I differ on some things. I don't know if the Great Northern War and the Psalm 83 are the same. Is Psalm 83? Here's a question for you guys. And again, this is not a salvation issue where you stand on Psalm 83. Okay, you're still saved. You still love Jesus. It's all good. We can disagree on Psalm 83. Sometimes people say, okay, relax. In advance, I say that lovingly. But what do you guys think? I'd love to hear comments. What do you think of Psalm 83? Has it already been fulfilled? Some say 1948. Some say 1967. Some even say in biblical times during the time of King David. Or is it yet to come? It is, to me, it's one of the most intriguing passages in Scripture. So let me know what you think about that. I'd love to hear your opinion on that, folks. I think it's a fascinating one for sure. Ezekiel 38-39, Isaiah 17, and Psalm 83. That's what we hear the most here on the newscast from our commenters, from our viewers. People are no dummies. We have a very, very smart, informed, and just spirit-filled viewership and audience who gets it. You know the signs and the times. I compare our viewers to the sons of Issachar, the men of Issachar. The Bible says they knew the signs, they knew the times, they knew what David should do about it, what Israel should do about it. An elite group of 200 men who surrounded King David. Well, we've got 503,000 men and women. We just passed the 500,000 subscriber mark, which is exciting. And man, I see the men and women of Issachar, the sons and daughters of Issachar here. It's a treat to be with you all. I only wish we could go live every single day. Maybe we will eventually. But I only wish we'd go live and have this interactive conversation every day. Okay, we have to get to questions. I wanted to get to Russia. Ask me about Russia in the question. And one thing about Russia, I did recently a YouTube short where now you guys might have noticed if you're regular viewers, we take a shorter clip from our YouTube videos and we make about a 1-minute clip. But I did one about Iran supplying Russia with drones, saying that's a bad thing. Folks, I got so much pushback saying, what do you mean? The U.S. is supplying Ukraine and the West is supplying tit for tat. Who cares if Iran is supplying Russia with drones? I'm not even going to detail. But I think it's an easy answer to that, and I didn't respond. But I mean, folks, a lot of pushback. Probably a lot of trolls, too, to be honest with you. Pro-Putin people, pro-Iran people. But it's pretty easy comeback. We have the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, which is vowing to wipe Israel and the United States off the map. Yeah, it's kind of problematic that they're getting involved in a European war and equipping Vladimir Putin, who's also an adversary. So I don't know. I don't think it's hard to separate that. Someone wrote, either you believe all the Bible or some of the Bible. You can't cherry pick. I guess in reference to Psalm 83. So if I don't believe that Psalm 83 is a future war, then I don't believe the Bible. I'm confused. I believe in Psalm 83, no doubt. I just believe it may have already been fulfilled in 67 or 48. I'm not going to bet the house on it or anything like that. It could be a future war, but it doesn't mean I don't believe Scripture. Again, we can have different views of certain prophetic passages, especially when it comes to prophecy. It's rare that you're going to see eye to eye with everyone on everything. Okay. And again, not a salvation issue. I believe every word of the Word of God. I just believe that maybe Psalm 83 might not be in the future, but that's okay. I just had to point that out. I glanced over and saw a comment. I had to shake my head. Okay. Let's get to questions. what do we have here, guys? 1 second. I am going to pull these up. Pardon me. Let's see. Here we go. We got them. Okay. Scrolling through here, folks. 1 second. Thank you for your patience. Okay, this is a good one from Melissa Resnick. Melissa, thank you for the question. Question for Erick. Do you think Israelis ascending the Temple Mount to pray will bring the next conflict? Melissa, I think there is a chance that could play a part. Maybe not in a larger conflict between Israel and Iran per se, but certainly in conflicts between Israel and the Palestinians. I'm talking chiefly about Hamas. The new Israeli government that we talked about earlier, this right-wing coalition incoming, many members of this coalition are saying, hey, we should be able to pray on the Temple Mount. This is crazy. The current status quo is nuts. To rewind, a history lesson for you, because people might be saying, wait, Jews can't pray on the Temple Mount? Isn't that something? No, they can't pray on the Temple Mount. In 1967, when Israel reconquered Jerusalem, it once again became the undivided capital of the Jewish state. At that time, Moshe Dayan, who was Israel's defense minister for a time, he let the Arabs maintain control of the Temple Mount. In particular, Jordan. The Jordanians are the custodians of the Temple Mount. Remember, that's where the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock are today, those sites which are holy to Muslims. But the Temple Mount was once the site of Solomon's temple and also the Second Temple. The Ark of the Covenant was once there. God's divine presence once dwelt there. The Second Temple, of course, Jesus taught there, chased out the money changers. So massive significance for Jews, of course. It's their holiest site, and Christians as well. I'm not going to get into where was the temple debate in the comments. People saying it wasn't on the Temple Mount. It was in the Sea of David. All the archaeologists say it. Who? Name one archaeologist, credible archaeologist in Israel who says that. I've yet to meet them, but we don't want to get sidetracked in that conversation again. The temples were there. Now the Islamic shrines are there, and Jews have not been able to pray since really for 2,000 years on the Temple Mount. But 1967, since then, if Jews go up to the Temple Mount and they try to pray, they could be arrested. It's that serious of a thing. But here's the deal. Over the past few years, more and more Jews are losing their patience. And they're saying, wait a minute, this is our holiest site. Our forefathers prayed here 3,000 years ago. As a Christian, Jesus walked that Temple Mount, taught inside the temple. And you're telling me that we're not allowed to openly pray up here? Only Muslims can pray up there? And the Jews in Israel say, that's not right. More and more are saying that. So you see record numbers of Jews ascending the Temple Mount. And now, they can't pray openly, but they can ascend the Temple Mount. I'm not a Jew, but I've done it many times. I've been on top of the Temple Mount, walked all around. I spent a lot of time up there. Now this incoming government, members of this incoming coalition, are adamant that, hey, we should be able to pray there. So what's going to happen? Could this new government change the status quo? Could they eventually declare that Jews, you know what? New day, Jews, we believe, should pray on the Temple Mount. Already, the Palestinians, Palestinian Authority, Hamas, Jordan are all saying, don't you dare do it. Don't change the status quo. But what if there is a push? And what if a guy like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the most controversial figure in this new Israeli coalition, what if he starts to go up in the Temple Mount on a regular basis? And members of the coalition, members of the government start to go up there. Folks, we are in prophetic times. And Jerusalem and the Temple Mount in particular, more and more will be the focus of the world's attention. Jerusalem, if you look on the map, is literally the center of the world. It's the center of the world prophetically. Look at Zechariah, who says that Jerusalem will become a burdensome stone. Any nation that comes against it, anyone who comes against it, will be cut to pieces. We are at that day right now. So watch the Temple Mount, what's going on there very closely. The timing of this new coalition is no coincidence. We'll say that. And could it spark something bigger? Yeah, I hate to say it could, because you know the reaction of Hamas. Hamas has painted itself as the defender of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, and they instigated a war in May 2021 over that. So very interesting times in Jerusalem. Fasten your seatbelt. Okay, what else do we have here? Good question from Melissa. Let's see. Okay, from Jim Brown. I'll try to answer this. A general question, but I think you guys might find interesting. Why do some people call Galilee the Galilee? I never hear these same people call the Sea of the Galilee. Well, people do call the Galilee region. I call it the Galilee. Yeah, we were up in the Galilee. That's just, you have the different parts of the Galilee region. You have the region around the Sea of Galilee. Why they don't call it the Sea of the Galilee, of the Galilee, good question. But many in Israel call it the Kinneret. Many Christians obviously call it the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus spent a lot of time, the disciples spent a lot of time. But in Israel, they call it the Kinneret. And many Israelis, we call it a sea. Israelis say it's a lake. They say the Sea of Galilee is actually a lake, and they call it the Kinneret. Interesting. I was just there about a month ago. I had a great time there, filming with a messianic recording artist by the name of Joshua Aaron. Does anyone know who Joshua Aaron is? Any Joshua Aaron fans out there? Joshua was awesome, incredible artist, and incredible guy. So that's coming up on the Watchman soon as well. But we were on a boat on the Kinneret, on the Sea of Galilee, which was fun. Okay, let's see what we have here. Keep them coming. Godzilla asks, that's a good handle. I like that. I remember watching with my dad Godzilla movies on Saturday afternoons growing up as a little guy. Do Saudi Arabia and Israel have a good relationship? Behind the scenes, yes. Now, officially, over the top and for public consumption, Israel and Saudi Arabia do not have formal diplomatic relations, and Saudi Arabia has yet to recognize the nation of Israel. Behind the scenes, folks, there's been a lot percolating. Is that a good word to use there? Over the past few years, I can tell you two things. Number one, before President Trump left office, a Saudi-Israel peace was almost on the table. I believe if President Trump served the second term, Saudi Arabia would have indeed joined the Abraham Accords. That would have been a done deal. That's anyone you talk to who served in the Trump administration, who served under Benjamin Netanyahu, they will tell you it was getting close with Saudi Arabia. That would have happened in a Trump second term. Biden has not advanced the Abraham Accords at all. But now that Netanyahu is coming back into office, remember, he was the architect, along with President Trump, of the Abraham Accords when the UAE and Bahrain came into the fold, Morocco, Sudan, all came to these agreements with Israel. Now that Netanyahu will be prime minister once again, he sees the Abraham Accords as one of his most significant achievements. So, folks, you can bet your bottom dollar that once again, he is going to try to advance the Abraham Accords and restart that conversation. And he's looking squarely at Saudi Arabia. I just interviewed Ron Dermer. You saw it on last week's Watchman show, and we posted clips here on the newscast. The former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Prime Minister Netanyahu's former top advisor. And Dermer I interviewed him in Jerusalem about a month ago, and he kept talking about Saudi Arabia and how that would be such a game changer if Israel and the Saudis were to make peace. What do you all think of that? I'd like to know what you think about that. Saudi Arabia is modernizing and opening up more and more under MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. I know people have expressed a lot of skepticism about that here in our comments before. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that. And let's see what you see. Well, let's see what you guys are saying about Psalm 83 as I just kind of glance down at the comments here. And I hope you guys didn't mind me calling out the trolls earlier, but when I see blatant anti-Semitism and Holocaust, ridiculing the Holocaust and Holocaust denial, I can't have that on the chat. And you don't deserve that. You deserve better than that. Hey, a poll result here. Wow. Psalm 83, has it already come or is it yet to come? 70% say it's yet to come. 29% say it's already come. Again, I'm not, I don't know if this is the word to use, dogmatic, I guess you would say, on this particular passage. I think it's fun to talk about. But my hesitation about Psalm 83, my good buddy Bill Salas, who's awesome, his interpretation for Psalm 83, okay, it's yet to come. Think about this. This is what gives me pause on Psalm 83 potentially being yet to come because of the alliance it would have to form. Now, some of the pieces are there. Gaza is named, Tyre and Sidon, I believe, which would be Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Gaza, Philistia, that would be Hamas, Islamic Jihad, all makes sense. Assyria, you would think, Syria and those Shia militias in northern Iraq and in those areas, that all makes sense. But then, and Bill's the man on Psalm 83, by the way, Bill Salas. If you haven't seen his books, check him out, prophecydepot.com. Bill has the Egyptians getting involved and Jordan getting involved and basically he calls them the inner ring of nations around Israel. My hesitation with that, folks, and see if this makes sense to you, for everyone saying he doesn't believe Psalm 83 is in the future. Maybe it is, but my hesitation with saying yes on that is I have a hard time right now seeing Egypt and Jordan align with Iran and its proxies as part of a Psalm 83 confederation. Egypt and Jordan right now are, especially Egypt, certainly threatened by that Iranian axis, that Iranian ring of fire. Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, the Shia militias. Egypt and Jordan, to say the least, do not see eye to eye with Iran. So for that to work, for Psalm 83, the way Bill sees it, and I love Bill, again, he's a great friend. For Psalm 83, in my humble opinion, to come together the way Bill sees it, you'd have to have something dramatic happen in Egypt and Jordan, where all of a sudden, Egypt and Jordan would throw in their lot with an avowed enemy, the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime is an enemy of Sunni Jordan and Sunni Egypt. All of a sudden, Egypt and Jordan would have to align with Iran and its proxies against Israel. I just can't see that happening at the moment. You have very clearly that dividing line in the region, Israel and the Sunni Arab nations like Egypt, Jordan, which Israel has peace treaties with, and the Abraham Accord nations on one side, and Iran and its proxies and its allies on the other, and they're constantly threatening the likes of the Sunni Arab nations. So something dramatic would have to happen in Egypt or Jordan, perhaps even a change of leadership, for that kind of alliance to work with Iran and its proxies, coming together with Iran and its proxies in a Psalm 83 coalition. Hopefully I explained myself there, and you see where I'm coming from now when we're talking about Psalm 83, which that's what gives me a little bit of pause in saying, it was 67 when it happened, or even 48, and not still to come. But let me know what you think in the comments. We got to go now. We've done a solid hour. This was great. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Even if you're not American, everyone, we can all give thanks to God. It's a good thing to give thanks to the Lord for all the things he's done for us. We will be back tomorrow with a brand new newscast. So until then, God bless you. Thanks for joining us. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.